the man who forgot how to sleep. What if, one night, you went to bed and you just couldn't sleep? And then the next night, the same thing happened. And the next. And I don't mean just tossing and turning. I mean your brain completely, utterly, forgot how to sleep. That the switch inside your head that lets you drift off was permanently jammed in the on position. For one Italian man, this wasn't a hypothetical. It wasn't a nightmare he could wake up from. It was a terrifying reality that plunged him into a months-long, non-stop waking nightmare that ended in death. This is the true and horrifying story of the man who forgot how to sleep. Section 1. The Ordinary Man. His name was Silvano. In early 1984, he was a 53-year-old man living a pretty great life. Known for his impeccable dress sense and fiery red hair, he was a picture of Italian charm. He was a family man, a husband, a father, and an uncle. By all accounts, an ordinary guy enjoying his life, with decades still ahead of him. He and his family had the same day-to-day concerns we all do: work, health, the future of their kids. But under the surface of this idyllic life, a dark secret lingered. It was a ghost that haunted his family tree, a whispered curse spoken about for generations. It was a strange sickness that would show up unannounced in middle age, steal a family member's mind, and then their life. For centuries, the causes of death were given vague, evasive names like nervous exhaustion. But the family knew. They knew it was something more specific, something uniquely theirs, and something inescapable. Silvano had watched his own father and two of his sisters die from this mysterious illness. He lived with a quiet dread, a belief that he had a 50-50 chance of inheriting the family's curse. He'd often tell friends, "If I can just make it past 55, I've got it made." He was 53. He was almost there. He had almost outrun the ghost. But in late 1983, the ghost caught up. Section 2. The night it began, the first sign was almost random. He was on a cruise ship, dancing, when he suddenly found his shirt drenched in sweat. It was a strange, profuse sweating that had no real explanation. Then came the symptom that would define his own personal hell. He went to bed, tired from the day, but sleep just wouldn't come. This wasn't the familiar frustration of a restless mind. It was different. It felt mechanical. It felt as though a door inside his brain, a door he had walked through every single night of his life, had been locked and the key thrown away. The first night became the second. The second became a week. The profound, bone-deep exhaustion was there. His body was screaming for rest, but his mind simply could not shut down. The gentle descent into slumber was gone, replaced by an unbroken, horrifying state of awareness. The waking nightmare had begun. Section 3. The waking nightmare. The first stage of the illness, which lasts for about 4 months, is defined by worsening insomnia that breeds psychological terrors. For Silvano, this meant intense paranoia and sudden, baffling panic attacks. He was exhausted, but his nervous system was in a state of constant, panicked overdrive. His heart rate and blood pressure were always sky high. He was a man running a marathon that had no finish line. Desperate, Silvano started a frantic tour of doctors' offices. The story was always the same. A man in his early 50s who, for no reason, couldn't sleep. The doctors were baffled. They followed the standard playbook, prescribing sleeping pills, then stronger sleeping pills, then powerful sedatives. Nothing worked. Not even the strongest barbiturates could force his brain into a state of true sleep. It was like trying to shut down a computer by mashing the wrong keys. The commands were sent, but the system just wouldn't respond. He might fall into a light, drug-induced stupor for a few moments, but never the deep, restorative sleep his body and mind were crying out for. As the weeks without sleep stretched into a month, and then 2, Silvano's reality began to fray. His body started breaking down. He lost a ton of weight. He developed tremors, his hands shaking from a mix of physical exhaustion and a nervous system running haywire. But the physical decay was nothing compared to the mental collapse. Without sleep, the brain loses its ability to tell what's real and what's a dream. Silvano began to experience vivid, terrifying hallucinations. He was trapped in a state of permanent hypnagogia, that bizarre, hallucinatory state right between being awake and being asleep. Except for him, there was no sleep to fall into. He was just stuck there, his waking hours populated by phantoms and waking dreams. He would move his limbs as if acting out a dream, all while being completely awake. He was a prisoner in his own mind, watching a horror movie projected onto the world around him, with no way to turn it off. For his wife, Elisabetta, and their family, it was a special kind of agony. They were watching the man they knew and loved vanish before their very eyes, replaced by a confused, terrified stranger. He was physically there, but his mind was lost in a fog. How do you help someone whose only problem is that they can't find a single moment of peace? It was Elisabetta's husband, a doctor named Ignazio Reuter, who realized Silvano's personal tragedy could be something more. He knew the family history. He saw the same pattern. He understood this curse wasn't supernatural, but medical. And he knew that Silvano, in his final tormented months, was a rare and vital opportunity for science. They were finally on the verge of giving the family curse a name, and maybe, just maybe, finding an answer. And if you're finding this story as fascinating and terrifying as I am, take just a second to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel continue to bring these incredible cases to light. Okay, so with this horrifying knowledge and a sliver of hope, Ignazio Reuter made a desperate call. Section 4. A name for the horror. In 1984, Silvano was admitted to the world-renowned Sleep Institute at the University of Bologna. By this point, he was a shadow of his former self, but he was lucid enough to understand what was happening. He knew he was going to die. He told the doctors, "In a few months, I'm going to die. This is one of the few chances you have to discover the cause of the curse of my family." In a final, incredible act of courage, he agreed to be recorded, studied, and to have his brain donated to science, hoping his death could save future victims. The scientists in Bologna had never seen anything like it. They covered Silvano in electrodes, hooking him up to an EEG to monitor his brainwaves, hoping to witness the moment he finally fell asleep. But that moment never came. The readouts were bizarre. They showed the brainwaves of a man who was desperately trying to enter the first stages of sleep, but just as he would get close, a chaotic burst of activity would erupt, violently yanking him back to full consciousness. It was, as one doctor described it, exactly like that jolt you feel when you start to nod off while driving. Silvano was experiencing that jolt, constantly, for months. As they documented his decline, the doctors cross-referenced his symptoms with the family's tragic history. It was a history the family had kept secret for centuries, afraid of the stigma. Now, in this hospital room, the secret was finally coming out, and then they gave the curse a name. It was a diagnosis that was both a revelation and a death sentence. Fatal familial insomnia. Fatal because it is always fatal. Familial because it's passed down through generations. And insomnia for its most cruel and defining symptom. Section 5. The Science of a Nightmare. The diagnosis was a landmark moment, but the real breakthrough came after Silvano's death in 1984. As promised, his brain was sent for analysis. Much of it looked normal, but when pathologists examined one specific small structure deep in the center of the brain, they were stunned. The structure was the thalamus. Think of the thalamus as the brain's main relay station. It manages almost all sensory information, and critically, it plays a central role in regulating the sleep-wake cycle. Silvano's thalamus was a wasteland. It was riddled with tiny, microscopic holes, giving it a spongy appearance. But in people with a prion disease, a single tiny mutation in the gene for this protein causes it to misfold into an abnormal, toxic shape. This rogue prion then acts like a zombie. It bumps into a healthy PRP protein and forces it to misfold into the same toxic shape, creating a catastrophic chain reaction. The toxic prions build up, kill off brain cells, and leave behind those sponge-like holes the doctor saw in Silvano's thalamus. In fatal familial insomnia, this destruction is brutally specific. It targets the very part of the brain that lets us sleep. The sleep switch wasn't just jammed. It was being systematically destroyed, eaten away from the inside out by an army of misfolded proteins. This specific genetic mutation was the source of the family's centuries-old curse. It explained everything: the sudden onset in middle age, the relentless insomnia, the dementia, and the inevitable fatal end. Section 6. The inevitable end. With the diagnosis of FFI, there was no hope. There is still no cure for any prion disease. The final stage of the illness is a complete descent into an unresponsive state. The man Silvano was the charming, well-dressed man with red hair, was long gone. He was trapped inside a body that could not rest and a mind that could no longer form coherent thoughts. The final video recordings of him are almost unbearable to watch. His eyes are half open, unfocused, staring into a void only he can see. He became mute, unable to communicate with the family at his bedside. In the end, after 9 months of non-stop, waking torture from when his symptoms first began, his exhausted body finally gave out. He slipped into a coma, a final, cruel imitation of the sleep he had been so desperately denied, and then he died. Conclusion: the legacy. Silvano's story is a profound tragedy, but his sacrifice was not for nothing. His courageous decision to turn his body over to science transformed the family curse into a known medical condition. His case was the cornerstone that allowed researchers to connect fatal insomnia to the underlying genetic mutation and the specific prion destruction in the thalamus. This knowledge has shed light on one of the rarest diseases on Earth. FFI is known to affect only about 40 families worldwide. The gene mutation in Silvano's family has been traced all the way back to a Venetian doctor from the 18th century, who is the earliest known ancestor to carry the gene. Because the disease typically strikes after people have already had children, the 50% chance of passing it on ensures that the illness, for now, continues. Silvano's journey is a chilling reminder of how fragile our most basic functions are. We think of sleep as a simple thing. We close our eyes and we drift off. We take it for granted, complain when we can't get enough of it, and willingly trade it for work or fun. But the story of the man who forgot how to sleep reveals the truth. Sleep isn't a luxury. It's a fundamental need, as essential as breathing or eating. It's a complex and delicate gift our brain gives us each night. So the next time you lay your head on the pillow, be grateful for that quiet descent into darkness. Be grateful for the ability to power down, to reset, and to dream. And remember Silvano, a man who gave his life to teach the world a terrifying lesson, that the ability to sleep is the ability to live.